welcome to this new episode of the Water Underground Talks. Today, it's our great pleasure to welcome Dr. Aureli from the UNESCO International Hydrological Program that is going to share some of her experiences with us. So welcome, Alice, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Viviana. It's a pleasure.
So starting with a couple of questions that we have for you, I would like to know, where did you first develop your passion for water?
Let's say that I was very, very young. I was following my father, who was a professor of hydrogeology, when he was starting in the countryside, preparing a pump test. And I enjoy to be in the nature. I enjoy to be with people in the nature, and this well was there and was a mystery connection with the underground. So this touched the fantasy of a young girl, and then I saw that it was a perfect job for a girl who didn't want to, at the time, do classical female jobs.
Wow. And then we are very lucky that you started this career so that we can learn from your experience. And now that you have a career, a well-established position, how do you think your personality or your personal interests make you succeed in your work?
But at the same time, I was a very much idealist when I was young and at school. So I wanted to do something that was useful for the society. And at home, there was the knowledge about the multilateralism, the international organizations, the United Nations system, and was a dream to think about how this system could have worked to make a better world, to help people and countries to avoid wars and establish peace. So there was the groundwater in one side and this idealism about something really related to be useful for the society.
Wow. And then actually this leads to my third question, that is, what do you think is the highest impact of your current work out of the working domain per se?
It is exactly that. I mean, starting in the United Nations and in UNESCO, a career where my knowledge on hydrogeology was at the service of member states, it was definitely the possibility to look at how recommendations, policies, studies on groundwater resources could have provided some benefit to people at all levels, from the governmental level to the grassroots level to the rural level, and definitely, I mean, this dream became a reality. I was starting working in UNESCO, where there is the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, and I was very young at the time. I was 31, and after my PhD, and I was the first girl in the secretariat of the IHP. It was the beginning of the 90s, and definitely I immediately found the right framework, the right atmosphere that allowed me to put in practice what was my dream. I mean, to see how these multilateralism, these negotiations for peace, for understanding, for compromises, the negotiations for coming together with agreements on many things in UNESCO, but in particular on water resources and groundwater resources, could have a home, and this home was the IHP. So I was really delighted to start in this career, and I'm still very happy to continue on it.
Wow, that's a great example on how we can follow your passion. And I think you are also a source of inspiration for many of us, especially for women, young women that have a dream and then want to work in groundwater. So we definitely would like to know more about your current project and your activities. So we would like to invite you to share with us your presentation and your more details about your experience.
Thank you. I will do with pleasure. And I will also like to tell you what was the final moment for looking at the UN. I was young at the time. I was at the first year of university, and with my father, we were at the Mar del Plata conference in 1977. I was only 18 years old, and that conference was the first one on the UN Intergovernmental Conference on Water Resources. And I was just starting university, and the recommendations and the papers of that conference are still very valid today. The issue is that most of that recommendation were not implemented, and we are going now to organize in 2023 a new conference, a UN conference on water resources. But at the time, unfortunately, if you read the document, you will see there was very little about groundwater and nothing at all about transboundary aquifers that then become one of my main topics, because there was almost nothing. And this is the presentation that I want to share with you, in particular the work that is really a particular niche for the UN here in UNESCO, the study that we started on transboundary aquifers. So if you allow me, I will focus on that amongst all the last panorama, the vast panorama on groundwater and hydrogeology. I would like to talk about that.
Yeah, with great pleasure. So we'll give the floor to your presentation.
Okay, so as I said to you, these few slides that I would like to share, I hope will be useful for the students also who are studying groundwater resources and hydrogeology to become interested in the problems related to transboundary aquifers. Let me give you some information about it. At the beginning of this century, there was really no information about transboundary aquifers. There was a knowledge about the existence of regional aquifers, systems that were large enough that we understood were definitely going in very, very large areas of several countries. But there was not really knowledge about where, how many, which country was sharing what, etc. So was the Intergovernmental Council of the UNESCO Hydrological Program that adopted a resolution to start the inventory, the study, the assessment of transboundary aquifers. And this was at the beginning of this century, as I said, in the year 2001. What UNESCO did was to create a coalition of several institutions and agencies and partners and experts and member states. Because, of course, the data that we started collecting had to be discussed and prepared and agreed with member states. It was not a simple, I would say, desk study. So we went really in the field, talking with member states and governments. The issue was to put together a program that was not only looking at the characteristic of the aquifer or the hydrogeology per se, because we are talking about a transboundary system that require much more knowledgeable aspects and skills. It's going to touch to international law, socioeconomic aspects. So what we did when we initiated the International Shared Aquifer Resource Management Program was to look at the different facets of the study of a transboundary aquifers. And one was the scientific and hydrological, the other was the legal aspect, the socioeconomic aspect, the institutional aspect, and the environmental aspect. In the year 2015, our assessment and inventory led us the inventory of almost 366 transboundary aquifer outside the EU, European Union region. And we immediately looked at the fact that there were only, and there are still only 5 agreements, international agreements on 5 transboundary aquifer at today. One of the most known and the first one that was really an example for many others is the Genevieve aquifer shared by France and Switzerland. Then we were able to go more and more in detail in studying some of the most largest transboundary aquifers of these 366 outside the EU. And we start also putting together some indicators, I mean, related what we know about the aquifer and, for example, the population density that depends on the aquifer, the renewable groundwater per capita, the human dependence on this system, and the groundwater development stress on the system. And then we look at the transboundary legal frameworks and the institutional framework. And there was the possibility then to make some strategical evaluation about some of these aquifers shared by 2, 3, or sometimes 4 countries. And what we understood is that this groundwater development stress is still growing and will be much larger from now to 2050. Having said that, we also realized that at the present, some of these transboundary aquifers are largely untapped resource, also because very little known by many countries, like for example in Africa, and that there are still much more studies to be done in some hotspots that have been identified in North Africa, for example, and Asia. Africa is one of the priority of UNESCO, the organization. It's one of the priority also for the Transboundary Aquifer program, because we have identified 72 transboundary aquifers mapped in Africa that underline 40% of the continent, and where 33% of the African population lives, and most of them in arid and semi-arid conditions, where groundwater is really the main, the most important source of water. And there are very few of these 72 aquifers that have been really studied today. Another important issue was really look at, in particular in Africa, but we did it also in other regions, how to manage water resources in a conjunctive management, and which kind of recommendation to be able to give to member states. So except in the very arid areas where, like in Libya or Northern Africa, these groundwater resources represent the main resource of water for drinking water and for human activities, because there are no perennial rivers. In the other part of the Africa and in other regions, we look at the situations related to the watershed boundaries, the aquifer boundaries, because what was absolutely important to recognize and to recognize to the countries that sometimes these system boundaries don't match each other. So the transboundary issue, it's really a critical issue when we are also looking at surface and groundwater. An example of how we were able to advance on the study and the management and the governance and the cooperation on transboundary aquifers is the example of the Stampriet aquifer shared by Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa. The three countries came together to look at the aquifer and to study the aquifer and to evaluate how better to coordinate and cooperate for a long-term management of this aquifer. And these gave birth to the first example of an institutionalized cooperation over transboundary aquifer in the Southern Africa region. And this is the first operational governance mechanism of a transboundary aquifer that was included in the river basin, in the Orasecom River Basin Organization. Why we did that? In order to govern and manage this aquifer, there are two possibilities. You can set up a mechanism, an institutional mechanism, a cooperation mechanism, a coordination mechanism, only for transboundary aquifers, or to look if in the region there is the possibility to make benefit of some other institutional framework related to water resources. And the second choice, nesting these in the Orasecom was evident because of the possibility to avoid the creation of a new institutional setting with other costs, with other agreements, with other negotiations, while in the Orasecom, the ministers of the three countries, plus also the Lesotho, that is not involved in the use of the Stampriet aquifer, but that makes part of this large region, is sitting. And there was no need to create a new treaty or a mechanism for coordination. This is, of course, a success story, and we are now suggesting this approach in many other transboundary aquifers related to international river basin in Africa. At this very moment, UNESCO has several transboundary aquifer projects around the world. And one of the most interesting, but for the story, for the importance of the democracy developed within the landscape of transboundary aquifers is certainly the denariic karst aquifer system. The countries of the ex-Yugoslavia came to UNESCO, and the issue was the scattering of information, of database, the loss of information about this karst aquifer that is very large. So Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, Greece, Serbia, and in a certain sense also Slovenia. And definitely we start working with the countries in order to prepare first of all, an hydrogeological model, and then a strategic action plan. And we are still implementing these with the countries. But what is important when we talk about cooperation, partnership, and hydrodiplomacy, being an hydrogeologist, being in a certain sense art scientist with some information on law and humanitarian affairs, it's really the building of trust and understanding between the countries, between the experts of the country, and these very often is much easier to achieve between scientists, between geologists, hydrogeologists, who look not at the boundaries but at the system. And when the trust and the agreement and the knowledge is shared, then you can superimpose the legal issues and the boundaries conditions that go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and create new hydrodiplomacy. Well, at the moment, the UN has several instruments, legal instruments on transboundary waters. The first one was the 1997 UN Watercourse Convention, the non-navigational use of international watercourses, and there is a little bit of groundwater there, but not really all groundwater. For example, aquifers related in the conventions are the ones who are directly linked with an international river basin. So all the deep aquifer and confined aquifer were not included in the convention. The second instrument that is, let's say, regionally binding at the very beginning is the Helsinki Convention. That is the Convention on Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes. The secretariat is the UNESCO, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. This convention, as I said, started as a regional European, large European convention, to now very recently become extended to the global access, to the access of all UN member states. There was very little groundwater also in the Helsinki Convention when, in December 2008, UNESCO started presenting with the United Nations International Law Commission the draft articles of what is now called the Law of Transboundary Aquifers. And the UN General Assembly start adopting resolutions about how to make use of these 19 draft articles on transboundary aquifers. These 19 articles are unique and are really targeted are unique because are really targeted to transboundary aquifers and groundwater characteristics issues, and include provision that didn't exist in other conventions, the monitoring, the prevention of contaminations of the transboundary aquifer, all with a particular attention to groundwater-dependent ecosystem, recharge and discharge. That it's a unique, let's say, characteristic of groundwater resources and aquifers that didn't exist and was not taken into consideration in other international law instruments. Where we are now, I mean, UNESCO and UNEC are working in the Agenda 2030 as responsible for the monitoring of one of the indicators of the SDG 6 of the development goal on water resources. And this indicator is really looking at the monitoring of the cooperations around transboundary basin areas. And when we say basin areas, we include rivers, lakes, and transboundary aquifers. And we look at the proportion of transboundary basin areas with an operational arrangement for water cooperation. We are on the second monitoring. We are working with 153 countries because there are 153 countries in this planet that share at least a transboundary water system, a lake, a river, an aquifer, and sometimes all together. And we have received already 122 country responses at November 28 November 2020, and we are very happy about that. This is a fantastic container of information and data provided by these countries that certainly, when we go to analysis by other scientists, by ourselves, will provide information, very valuable information for the study and the management of these aquifers. Having said that, when we look at the response, we can see that only 77 countries reported on aquifers. And we have now really the possibility to say clearly to the world, to the policymakers, to the decision makers, and to the governments, well, data on transboundary aquifer remain a challenge. Very recently, the United Nations have launched the Global Accelerator Framework, the SDG 6 Global Accelerator Framework, that should help the countries to achieve the SDG 6, we hope, at 2030. Well, as UNESCO staff and expert, I should tell that education and cooperation is at the root of our changing approach to the peaceful management of transboundary aquifer system. Lack of capacity in the management of water resources, and in particular on groundwater resources, is a crucial issue. We need much more investment to improve water education and water capacity on water resources. But also, we have to look how to prepare new CVs for the new and young generation. This CV should consider multiple aspects of the realm of water resources and give to the students the right tools to have a comprehensive approach at the different facets of water resources. And I come back at the very beginning of this story when the Transboundary Aquifer program in UNESCO started in the year 2001 with the idea and the approach and the reality we did of looking at transboundary aquifer from the different facets, the scientific, the legal, the socioeconomic, the institutional, the environmental, and definitely I think hydrogeologists, but also lawyers and social scientists need to talk more each other and have these some knowledge in their CVs. Well, open questions that definitely require much more than a simple one-way answer for the students and for the ones who want to challenge on this very difficult topic. How can cooperation be improved, and how can water-related conflicts be prevented? Do you think that legislation, international convention, treaties can contribute to cooperation, are essential, are they unique? How can socioeconomic, cultural, ecological, and other values be incorporated into the planning and management of shared groundwater resources under condition of water stress? So I leave you with these questions. I have no answer yet, so I hope somebody will be able to do it, and I'm sure the new generation will. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Alice, for this very interesting presentation and for raising this very important question, and also for challenging the students that are watching this video to engage for the long-term protection of shared groundwater resources. So thank you so much for being with us in the Water Underground Talks.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for this opportunity. Bye.